welcome everybody to the Fantasy Tavern podcast, the first episode in which we will talk about the Golden Quill Month, and we will talk about who we are and how we find each other. And who's we? Well, I am Ilse, a magical wielding dragon companion and a creator of worlds, and I have a co-host who is Dida. And Dida, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm a Norwegian author, single mother who often sits writing or reading. I'm very often lost in my own world, Corsa, and that's where I'm often will find me. And I've been quite passionate about reading all the time, like all through the years. And I recall a certain moment when I was like 12 that I knew I wanted to write, and now I'm there. So that's sort of the core of me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the past, I think I don't remember an exact moment when I started to write, but I was a teenager. I do remember that. But let's go for a real quick look at the Golden Quill Month before we skip that altogether, like in our test.
Yeah, sure.
The Golden Quill Month is now 2 weeks along, and we've been doing some live streams, and we've been writing, but also doing a lot of other things, because in the Golden Quill Month we think it's important that we do not only look at the word count, but also at other parts of the writing process. And for me that means for example, that I've been working on some maps, I've been doing world building, and I've been doing research to get a better picture of, for example, tropical islands, to make sure that I have a good picture of that island. And that for me is one of the beautiful things of the Golden Quill Month. I can basically do what I want and still see my progression, because that is what it's all about, and that is why we set it up. And
yes, progression is the most important thing, and when you need world building, that's what you're doing. And for example, other programs, they will totally ignore what kind of thing you're doing. If you're not writing, you are not working, and that's just utter bullshit, because when you are thinking about your project, that is also work. Like you are pre-planning a scene, you are thinking through it, you are sort of daydreaming through what your scene is going to look like. You imagine, you visualize to yourself what things will look like, how people sound when they're talking, what people look like, how they interact. All of that is planning. When you have in mind what things look like and what people will say roughly and how they will sound if they are upset, you need to convey that. And all of these are little things that are elements in how you write. So it's even I'm panting, which means I just sit down and write. I just type it out. I don't know exactly what will happen until I actually write it. But I have a rough idea, because I can have an idea. It will be like a spark that ignites in me, and I just sit down and write. But then I have a rough idea what I want, and that's sort of just underneath the surface all the time until I actually write it. So, but anyways, it's about grabbing the essence of what you want. That's what you do when you write.
yeah.
So if you know these things beforehand, we have certain degrees of needing to feel ready.
Yeah, that's true.
And you're a planner, so you need like more thorough world building than I do before starting to write. And that is the personal adjustments we all do.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, when I
And that's work too.
yeah, it's
Because I might have to do more work after I have written.
yeah, it's a mix indeed. Yeah. And when I originally
but all of it is work and all is progress.
Yeah, indeed. When I started with writing years and years ago, I did start just out of the blue and with no plan, no outline or whatever. But for the Tergaenae Chronicles, it's really essential that I have this outline, even though it's only just a few sentences, just a small summary per chapter. But because there is so much foreshadowing that I need that planning indeed. And that is part of that progress that I make, because I need to know when what is going to happen and when what can happen, and who has been to certain places and who hasn't been there, which characters could have seen each other, or maybe they have seen each other but they don't know each other yet, things like that. And that is all part of the process, and seeing and developing that is for me a fun thing to do and fun thing to see also, because you keep seeing progression, and it's so important to know that you have progression when you are in your writing process. Even though you're not putting words in your manuscript, you are working on your book or whatever you are writing. And that is what is important. And like you said, with other programs, you don't see that progression. They're only focused on word count. And I mean, it's great.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's great to have that novel or the first draft of a novel after 1 month, but that's not the only thing you do. There's so much more involved, like you already said.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. And it's just knowing that that you have that progression will also keep you going. That is what I.
That's important. The carrot.
Exactly.
The carrot, so to speak. Yeah. What can you have? If you visualize what progress you have, that's a direct encouragement to keep going. So it's important to sort of recognize every step of work you are actually doing. And that is sort of summing up why we wanted the Golden Quill Month, because that's about, like, not exactly measuring, but acknowledging the different processes in the entire project itself. And it's about keep going, and hopefully also help others to get going and keep going. Their projects.
And that is what is important indeed.
But I sort of think that's a good point to pass over to how we met, because that was during a NaNoWriMo camp.
Yes.
That was camp April in 2019.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it was, And you were the leader of that camp. And
I vaguely remember that.
Group, and that's where we got to know each other. Yeah. I recall that. I even recall some of those chats we had. And some of those people who were in there, it's like, I get little glimpses of them sometimes. And that's kind of fun. But mainly what came out of it was that I got a good sparring partner for bouncing my ideas, and we've been friends ever since, and we see results from it. Because we have been spurring each other. We have.
Exactly, and it's so wonderful how that can grow. And I too remember that cabin in April. And I remember that we were talking loads in chat, and we had a rule, because for those who don't know about the cabins that were part of the NaNoWriMo camps, you would get together in a group of, I think, 15 max people, or maybe 20, I don't remember exactly.
No, I think we were 20.
20, yeah.
I don't think our group was full, but I think we were like 18 or 20 or what it was.
I think
like we're having a couple of free spaces, but people had different degrees of being active. And I just have to remark, this was on the old NaNoWriMo website, so the chats were different. They were a bit smoother and easier, and everybody were there, because they changed I think it was the same year before summer they changed how that worked, and that's when we moved to Discord.
Yeah, that's true.
Because that was the first time in June, I think, you started the first Discord server.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was that.
Because the settings of that site, got different. Yeah.
Indeed. And
because we were very active and never seen a more active group since.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And
actually,
and the fun thing,
that was cool.
Yeah, and one of the rules we had in that cabin, in that first cabin in April, I remember that distinctly, is that we told each other, you don't have to scroll back, because we would be so active that if you had checked in the morning and you would check back again in the afternoon or the evening, you could have easily missed several hundreds of messages. So at that point, we said, okay, we're not asking you to scroll back to go through those hundreds of messages. If you want to know something, just post it, and we'll get you up to speed again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I've been at work. What did you talk about since I was here last? There's 5 topics and 517 messages missed.
Yeah.
And that was in a time span of 8 hours or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was crazy.
It was indeed, and we had a lot of fun. I mean, sometimes we would elaborate on things afterwards. That you had something like, okay, did we need that? No, but it was fun. did we
exactly.
need?
I recall one person found out that a zombie will fall apart within 36 hours. So that's a very inefficient soldier to have, actually.
Yeah, it was.
It's like one of those fun facts that would boil down at least 100 messages.
Yeah.
And that was her research, yeah.
Yeah. It was so funny. And
people telling about research is actually quite fun.
Yeah. And sometimes there are just golden nuggets in that research that you can use, and sometimes it's seemingly useless research, but it was fun to talk about anyways. And
it's about practicing the research too, getting efficient and finding the most important things about a certain topic.
Yeah,
that takes training, and I was about learning it back then. Like that. I've always been a Googler, all since that became available like it is now, like the search engine that works well and comes up with hundreds of pages. But it's about picking out what's essential in a research and finding those things, or maybe getting new inputs from people. That was new to me in that way back then. So it was useful in other ways than the direct productive ways.
True. And you would also, or at least I would also come to know of resources that I didn't even know about, and things that I might not have even thought about, just because when you are researching on your own without sparring that with someone else, or without talking about it with someone else, and bouncing, that was the word I was looking for, without bouncing it off someone else, and seeing what other people are using for research and what other people have for knowledge, that if you will do it all on your own, you miss out on things. And
yes, you do, because you keep your own single track, and you don't get any interruptions, but also you don't get any other inputs that you didn't think about.
Exactly, yeah. And I see that one of our audience members, Fee, you say you remember from your own Discord group as well, in 2022 people were so active. Maybe it was just a height of Nano. It could have been, yes, and it was a good time, but afterwards things, well, let's just say, became very different. And let's keep it at that, I think. And And
It's not our business to pick that apart, I think. So, because the others have been doing that already, and they've been doing a good job at it. Just
exactly.
to
Yeah.
state the obvious. So we have simply left the NaNoWriMo as a good option,
Mm-hmm.
really. And that's why we have the Golden Quill Month, because our mission with that is to replace the old Nano.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
we'll see.
simple as that.
Yeah.
Try to make a better option for ourselves and for those who want to join us.
Exactly. And we may not be a very big group at the moment, but that's okay. We grow slowly, we build the community, we have real good connections within our community, and that way we're also really able to help each other. And that is one of the things that I love about the Golden Quill Month. We can help each other in so many more ways than just that focus on writing. And
it's about having goals and do it together.
Yeah, and about also helping each other tackle hurdles and reach those milestones, or adjust the goals in case you need that. For example, I have
I've been
adjusted
doing
my
that.
goals. Yeah. And it's like I have adjusted my goals because I realized at some point that the goals that I set were quite high regarding my post-COVID symptoms that I realized later on. So I adjusted my goals.
That's something that could happen if you are like very energetic and in a good mood, and you set up these options, and I'm going to do this, I want to do that, I'm doing that too. And there's the next day, if you are feeling like, oh, I'm worn out, oh god, all of those things, that was way too much. Haven't we all done it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
I did some adjustments because I sort of wanted to see if I could run a certain habit. But I know that if I want to do certain habits over time, I can. And that thing with the words, that sort of stole focus.
yeah.
So that's why I eliminated that one.
Yeah, and that's
That
indeed
was
a
just
very
a
good
small
decision.
thing, you know.
Yeah, and sometimes you just have to make those small decisions to, in the end, get where you want. And if that is reaching a certain amount of words, perfect. If it is going forward with your story in whatever way, then that is your goal. If you need several maps to make, if you need new characters to develop or existing characters to develop further, or look in your outline and see where the gaps are and where you might need some more work in your outline to be able to write your story, or when you are already writing and you find that you are missing world building, like I found last week when I realized that partially one of the reasons why I had so much trouble writing that first chapter of this first book is that I didn't have a good feeling for the tone and especially the setting. And the setting was...
That is so important.
Yeah, exactly. And
a big pardon for interrupting that, but that is such an important point. It needs to feel right.
Exactly.
You need to grasp that right.
Indeed. And for the listeners who don't know, Tergaenae Chronicle starts around the equator of Tergaenae, which is a new planet. And I've been to a tropical island only once for a few weeks. That was a wonderful holiday. But when I started writing this first chapter, I didn't feel that setting. I did start writing it, but at the same time I felt a bit disconnected, and I couldn't quite envision how, for example, the rooms of one of my main characters was, what she would see if she would look outside of the window. And she, in the beginning, she will look outside of the window because there's a little creature there. And I didn't quite feel it. I kept on writing, but later on I realized why I didn't feel it. It was because I didn't have a good grasp of how a tropical island could look. So that is when I started
Because that can be a lot.
Yeah, for me, the vision that I originally started with was more of a European castle or a European palace. And at the same time, I was like, that's not possible because it's in the tropics. So you don't need those very big, thick walls and other things. You don't need that in the tropics. So how is it? And that is
Not
what...
if the protection is outside of those walls.
Yeah.
Like city protection from the seaside, or you don't need those thick walls to withstand cannonballs or whatever.
Exactly. And
or the ballista.
yeah, and that's when I realized, okay, I need to go back to my world building and look into how tropical islands work and how they look and what the environment is. And of course, it's now completely different than it was, or no, maybe not completely different, but it is different from, let's say, 500 years ago. But if you look into it, you still have that better idea, and that is all part of the process. And during this Golden Quill Month, we can record that progress, and I feel really satisfied that I did that world building and that I discovered how it can work for my story, which meant that
you righted the wrong.
Yeah,
you corrected something.
Exactly. And if I would have only had a word count goal, then it probably would have made me feel that I wasted time because I hadn't written any words. And that's the big difference.
I totally recognize what you're saying. Yeah, totally recognize that.
Oh, that's good. Well, that is after all why we set it up.
It's about thinking about the little things and correcting where you might have gone wrong before and what you need to correct to keep going.
That's so true.
It takes to be able to tell your story.
Yeah.
To make it feel right, to convey what you mean to convey. Because it all boils down to storytelling. That's what we want to do. We have a story, an idea, a message. But that's not all, because we want to convey so much more than just that.
It's true.
Make people feel things when they read it.
Exactly. And
because that's how we've been experiencing reading before.
True.
That's what we want to pass on.
Yeah. And it's we want people to feel the forest that Sam and Frodo and Merry and Pippin were walking in, and we want to feel
exactly.
Yeah. and
those lovely sunrises you don't see like in the films.
Yeah. And it's
things like that.
Yeah. And you need time to develop that.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah, and world building is also involved, but you need time to develop it both in your head and in your mind and in your heart, and then you can put it on paper, and then you can go on with that, and only that way you will be able to really convey that, the whole of your story, and not only, just like you said before, not only what the characters do and how the story flows, but also how they feel and what they can smell and what they can touch and how something they touch feels and what they can hear. It all makes part of the story, and it all makes it come to life.
Yeah. It's about conveying what they experience and how they feel about things, how to get into their thoughts, taking part in their lives.
Exactly.
And I actually think that's also the future of writing now in these artificial intelligence days, that like real literature is going to be sought after. That in a while people realize that AI written novels are bland, and not really having depth.
Yeah, and that's...
So if you write that, we won't be outdated ever.
I think that you hit the... how do you say that? You hit the nail on the head? Something like that.
Nailed it. Kaboom.
Yeah, you nailed it. Exactly, that was it.
I hope so, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I can't imagine that being an author is a problem in AI days. Not at all, but the opposite.
It's more the not so much being an author, but it's what I see happening on social media, especially on the older social media like the old big blue bird. People are condescending towards authors and other creative artists. They say, well, then you should have picked another profession, or you just have to learn something new. Well, no, it doesn't work like that. And it's something that you feel, and with AI can't feel. AI can only regurgitate, and that's it. And that will be
very much so. And that's the accuracy of describing AI. Regurgitating. That's what they're doing. Nothing more.
And one of the fun things about the writing process, about the human writing process, is that we can change, but we can also we know why a character makes certain choices, and also what a character truly feels, and how some things that happened in the past can not only define what a character is right now, but also why a character makes certain decisions, for example. And that's something that only a human can do, because you have that experience. And if you and if you are ever in a doubt, you can talk about it with other people. There are so many authors, both published and unpublished, who are so willing to help out other authors, like in our Discord. And it's also how Dida and I continued from the cabins back in the days. We could bounce off ideas of each other, and we could also really help each other. We became true sparring partners who helped each other make our work better, make our world also better.
Yes, because we are not competitors. We are more colleagues.
Exactly.
And about co-working, that is I'm getting baffled if I read about things like in certain areas of writing where authors are bashing one another.
That's something,
like fighting online in groups. And I don't get it. Like, why are they acting up like that, sounding like competitors, like they are stealing each other's ideas or whatever? I don't get it.
Me neither.
Because there is no way I can write exactly like you, and there is no way you can write exactly like me. So what is there to fear, really?
I
don't get it, because we get more than ourselves if we can cooperate some and help each other grow, become better.
It's something I don't understand either. I mean, I've seen stories. I won't go into a lot of detail because other people on YouTube
I skipped that too.
They have made really very good, insightful, almost documentaries about it. But people who will leave not only one negative review on a book they haven't even read, but also leave a whole mountain of negative reviews with all fake accounts, for example, and just dragging other authors down. And it's
fakeness. It's all about the fakeness, all about an act. Theater.
And why does someone feel they are better than any other author? They're not.
Not if they're doing things like that.
Exactly.
Because that is simply being fake. That's going against nature.
Right. And
I mean, that is meant without criticizing individuals.
It's we all are authors, and for each of our books there is an audience, and for one that it may be a huge audience. I mean, look at, I don't know, Brandon Sanderson and George R. R. Martin, people like that. I mean, they have huge audiences, and that's just in the fantasy world. And if you look at contemporary fiction or other fiction, there's Jodi Picoult, how do you say that? But also, for example, Diana Gabaldon and Deborah Harkness, who have really other audiences, but at the same time people in those audiences might also read fantasy books, really deep fantasy books, like our books, like Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire, I should say, or Lord of the Rings, and there
because readers are not satisfied with stopping at one book a year.
Right. And they, I mean, yeah, you can say fantasy is my favorite genre. Sure. But fantasy has so many books. There are thousands upon thousands of fantasy books, if not more.
Yeah, and like dozens of genres inside of fantasy.
Yeah, exactly.
So whatever you feel like, write it.
Indeed. And that is where, like we talked earlier about, where sparring partners and critique partners, and where someone who you can bounce off ideas of, who can help you with that. They can I mean, you have no use for someone who says, it's all been done before, it's all been written before, so don't think that your idea is unique. Your idea is unique because your book is written in your voice, with your characters, with your world. Even if it is in our contemporary setting, it's still your voice, your story. And no one can tell that any better than you yourself, like Dida already said earlier. There is no one else.
It's about how you convey it.
Exactly.
That's the uniqueness is one thing, but about making people read it, it needs to have something that appeals to people.
Yeah.
And I have to say, one huge benefit of bouncing ideas, and will this work or will it not work? What are the flaws? Then you get instant feedback.
Exactly. And it's like, let me give you an example from a little while back. I showed Dida a photo of what I had in mind for one of my main characters, how he would look. And Dida said, "Okay, that's
that one."
This is just paraphrasing, but this is quite different than what I expected," she told me. And I was like, okay, that's your prerogative.
Yeah.
And I mean, Dida reads my descriptions and reads parts of my story, etc. And she makes a vision in her head of what she reads, and I, as the author, have a vision of my own. And she showed me a photo of what she had expected of that character, and I was like, okay, it's interesting, but no, it's not what I had in mind. And several days later, I just woke up early in the morning and I was like, she was right, because this character, it wouldn't absolutely not be logical if the character would look like what I originally had in mind. And that,
I recall that conversation. That was interesting.
Yeah. And that is the beauty of having a sparring partner, of having someone to bounce your ideas off. And it's not only when you have already completely written your story, it's exactly in that beginning and during writing your first draft and your first couple of drafts, you can bounce off the ideas and the images you have gathered, etc., to see even, okay, I'm looking at it this way. Is that convincing, or does it work for you? And how, if I just have this description, what do you expect on the other side? And does that match with what I have in mind as an author? Or is there a huge mismatch for some reason? And if there is a huge mismatch, is that something I, as an author, mind, and will I adjust whatever it was? Or is it something that I, as an author, think, okay, that's it, how you see it, I see it in a different way, and I just go on with
because it's, in the end of the day, it's your choice. But the way you said it, like the first thing you said, it was as if, without meaning it or knowing I pointed out a flaw that became visual to you. You became aware of it, something you hadn't thought about.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And it was
because I simply conveyed my first impression and what I thought about that.
Mm-hmm. And
because that was the first time you ever posted a photo
Yeah. Was that the first time?
Like, I have, yes, I think so. I'm not sure because you posted me a photo and said that I imagine he would look a bit like
The
this
actor.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was an actor I had in mind, indeed.
And yeah, and I think you had showed me a picture of a couple where that guy was in
True.
before,
True.
but I'm not sure if you had specified exactly. And I said something about how I imagined based on personality.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
so wonderful how that can work, because I had this intensity in the photo that I showed, and I'm looking at our audience chat at the moment, and Fee asked me who the character was, and yes, Fee, you were right, it's Najat indeed. The couple photo that I posted it's for me a photo that captures the intensity of that moment in that particular series, and it was the intensity between those characters
And
that I
that
wanted.
was what I recalled.
Yeah.
Yeah, from the first time you posted. Because I
Okay.
didn't think about that character as being like an inspiration for your character. I thought about the moment, what they conveyed together as a couple.
And the fun thing is,
Yeah, because that's what you wanted to show me then.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the fun thing is, Najad is in the long run of the Tergaenae Chronicles, in the long way that I have been writing it, Najad is a newer character. I started writing him back in November last year, I think, at the top of my head. And the fun thing is, he was inspired by the movie The Prince of Persia. And why? Not so much by any of the characters, but because there's this brotherhood between these three princes, and I always felt that with the two brothers that I had in mind, I was missing something, but I didn't know what, until Najat's story and Nasha's story came up, and I was like, that is what I was missing. And it just clicked. That is also why I'm calling what I'm writing right now the new first book, because I had already written a huge part of the old first book, and it started way differently. It will be part of the series, but in probably divided over a few books. But it started.
The sound just break?
Yeah. And it will be, parts of it will be probably in the second book and in the third book, but characters.
Yeah, it's about, I recognize that with getting something entirely new, you might need to adjust what you already have because things have changed.
Yeah, exactly.
I get that a lot, actually, getting new things.
Yeah,
I
it's
think it was last year you added this couple story.
true.
I think
True.
it was last year, yeah.
Yeah, and that is
It's quite new.
And that is, I mean, Dragon City on its own, that is a very old concept. It is, I mean, I started out with the Dragon Riders, and which are now Dragon Companions and not just Riders. There's a huge difference for me in that. And I couldn't envision dragons living in our world as it is right now until I saw the Hang Son Doom caves. I also didn't quite know how I would envision the world in another world. And then I saw photos and a video of a Hang Son Doom cave, and that is the moment Dragon City was born.
Yeah.
But not
and
yet.
Timescale, when was this?
That is, let me see, I think 6 or 7 years ago. It was before we met in the cabins, because that's quite an old thing for me.
You were talking about Tergaenae when we were in that cabin. So you had your world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
I recall that much. Just like my world has been developing last 3 years. But I had the initial idea back in 2008, I think.
Yeah.
So it has been around quite a while, but the most progressive development has been happening the last 3 years.
Incredible how that can be, right? It's so, I mean, Dragon City.
It's when getting the things right. It packs on really fast when I get things right.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, Dragon City was the beginning. And at some point, I also really developed the White City, and those were sort of contrasting cities that, in a way, also had to work together. But now they are on the same continent, but really, Dragon City is in the south, and the White City is in the north. There's, I think, 2,500 kilometers between them. So there's quite a difference. Shall we
Same
say.
length as Norway. From end to end. Norway is about 2,500 kilometers long.
Yeah, I think it's like that, or maybe it's shorter. It's from the southern tip of France, I think, till the most northern tip of the Netherlands or Germany. So maybe it's 1,500. I'm not quite sure anymore.
Yeah, but if you put a pencil down in Oslo and twist Norway around, we get like the northern point reaches to Rome. So we're quite a long country, but a narrow one.
That's true. Yeah.
Depending on how you measure.
Yeah. And it's when I started to look into the Hangson Dune cave. I mean, at first I had this more European idea of those caves, what they would feel like on the inside and how they would be. But when I started to look more into the Hangson Dune caves, I found out it's really a far more tropical environment, and that is when it's started to really grow, and when Tergaenae became a planet that was far larger than I originally had in mind. And also the start of the story, and where the main series, the first 5 books of the main series will play, is not in a European-ish setting, but it's far more in a tropical setting. So things really started to change, and when I knew that, it's like you said, Dida, then it really started to develop, and that is so awesome. And when because before you can start presenting something new to readers, you sort of have to break your own tropes, because it's okay to write tropes, but you need to use them for your own take. True. Exactly.
You have to find your own thing.
Yeah.
Within a concept.
Exactly.
It's okay to reuse concepts, because there's a reason they are there, and that's because they're good. It's not wrong to use tropes, but you need to personalize them, make them yours.
True, so true. And
so the moment you start to get things right, you feel it, and that's when you start getting ideas fast.
And that's the beauty of writing. That's the beauty of your writing process.
That's the magic of writing.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, it's about you'll never run out of ideas.
No.
It's just, which one do you write?
Exactly. And I mean, I have had ideas for spin-offs and for totally different stories that do not even play in Tergaenae. Just from little snippets of something I saw, or of a TV series or a book or just a news article or something. And I just jot them down and set them aside for now. There are also things that I see of which I think, that could play nicely in Tergaenae. Yeah. One of those will be...
This is why you take notes as well.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's important to take notes.
Yeah, and even if you think that it can't play in your current story, don't throw away those notes. You never know how it might work out. You never know how it might work out. You never know if at some point you become stuck with your story because you've been writing it for so long that you're stuck, that you just can't write anymore at that moment. And then you have another writing project to work on, which is completely different, but you can work on it, and that means that you can keep on writing, so keep on being creative, and that way you keep on developing your writing skills and your research skills and your world building skills, etc. And that is what is important, and that is why you need to keep those notes about other stories. And of course, at some point you might come to the conclusion that the notes that you made are really useless. Well, then you just put them in a drawer or in a collection document of fun notes to be looked at.
You might need them in 10 years' time.
Exactly.
Or they spur something if you take them out again in a few years. And yeah, that's why you collect your notes.
Yeah, and
because later on as well, if you let that idea rest, and then perhaps a few weeks' time or in a few months' time, you might think of something else that That's kind of a good idea. But then I see something in that in my feed, like whenever, and then you can go back. If you archive articles, for example, and you can look through what you have been looking at before.
Yeah.
I'm doing this. I'm like storing links all the time.
Yeah, same here.
And sometimes I go back, and sometimes it's like, oh, it's that many months since I thought I read it. I thought I read that 2 months ago, and it's 5 months ago. So sometimes it's hard to find because I could store like dozens of links in a day.
Yeah.
On good days. And other days I might just store 1 or 2 or none at all.
Yeah, and I have this in my Firefox, in my browser, I have this map with resources, and there's resources for world building and for character development, etc. And it can be simple news articles of something they found in, for example, the Smithsonian Museum is very good in posting all kinds of historical things where you
find scientific articles. Yeah, they're good. Good, serious source.
Exactly. And they sometimes it's a world building thing that I will pick up from it, but other times it's just a little detail for a character or for a story progression or something like that. And that is why I keep those articles, just to make sure that I have it at a later point. And it's
and I often store into Pocket or simply on my personal server here on Discord, and then I have a archive that I can write in keywords and find again those articles related.
Indeed. And that is
so it's about finding a system that works for you for storing.
That is, it has to work for you, and you have to be able to find things in an easy way.
Yes, that's very crucial.
Yeah.
Because if you can't find a thing, for example, if you email yourself, I can never find anything.
Yeah. And
so it's better to have links in a place where you can open links, search for them.
And also
because the titles will be available.
Yeah. And sometimes you need to go through your bookmarks to see if some articles are still there. I remember that I bookmarked some articles and I looked afterwards, and a couple of months or a year later, and they were gone. And I was like, okay, let me see if I can find it in some other way or capacity.
Yeah, it's like dead links.
Yeah, dead links, yeah. And sometimes you can find them back with the Wayback Machine and the web archive, and sometimes they are just completely gone. And then I'm like, okay, well, maybe I can find something about the topic at least, because if there's one...
And sometimes you get surprises the other way, like finding sites that haven't been updated or upgraded for 15 years and they're still there.
Yeah, indeed. Although I think in this time and age...
It's like, surprise!
Yeah! and then I find articles of which I think, okay, how old is that exactly? When did you discover that? But it doesn't matter, and sometimes very old things can also give you inspiration for development of your character or of your story or of your world, as long as it is useful.
It's about pressing that button, search.
Yes, exactly. And as long as it is useful for you, then it is useful. It doesn't matter. So that's something to always keep in mind.
Then you used it.
Yeah, and no matter if someone...
And I often take screenshots just because of that dead link problem.
Yeah, exactly. And
so having a few screenshots is good.
Yeah, and it also gives you the insight in immediately without having to go to that article. And like I can keep it relatively easy in Scrivener, but I also have loads of information just on my laptop and on a hard disk, external hard disk, so that I can easily get to it even when I don't have an internet connection, because that's quite fight. If you store all those links and you don't have internet connection for some reason, then you have a problem because you can't access those links.
Exactly.
So I make PDFs of articles of which I think, okay, I really need that information. I remember Dida, you once posted a link for the layout of a castle, of how a castle is built up with several rooms and such.
Yeah.
And in the end, I made a PDF of that article because I knew that I really needed that information, and I wouldn't take the risk of that article being deleted at some point, or that I couldn't access that information in one way or another.
You know what? That is a PDF you could find share in the Discord channel, because that's resource.
Haven't I already done that at some point? So yeah, that's a lot of talk about how we research and what we do with research and with our story and world building.
Often I research when I realize I need something. But I might as well just write what happens up until a certain point, and then I make brackets. Like I like these square brackets. That's a message to my future self. Always square brackets. That's my own way of telling me, hey, pay attention. And then I have something to search for as well, like searching a document for square brackets. And within those I might write, for example, insert fight description here, and then I can research, and then I just go on writing after that, because the point is, bum, they fight, and then what happens afterwards, that's the most important thing. So I skip out the whole thing for the time being. And then I might spend hours on YouTube or whatever watching fights, right? Because I don't think I need to break off my writing flow just to go and do that research.
Exactly.
Because the important thing is that if you have flow, if you have things that wants out, you write.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't interrupt yourself, because you have to respect the process. And it's also about respecting yourself. Because here is one pro tip I want to give off to everyone. Mark this point. It's about writing. That is something you do without the critic within there at all.
Exactly.
He lives in a different floor.
Yeah.
He works on a different floor. They don't see each other work until after the work is done.
Yeah, that is something.
Do you write? And you sit in one floor, and the critic, she is on a different floor. Don't stop your own process. Respect the flow.
Yeah, it's so important that we are all guilty of it, letting that inner critic go.
Me too.
And it can really stop our process, and that's not what you want. And
it's not.
Yeah, and it's a lesson that we all learn at some point, that it's way better to just leave the inner critic, like Dida says, elsewhere. And I mean, she
at least until you're done working for that day.
Exactly. And she can come out.
She can come. She can give her opinion, but later.
Yeah, indeed.
And you might as well ignore what she has to say.
Exactly.
That is perfectly all right too.
Yeah. It's
because if you give yourself room for doubt will come, because doubt is strong.
Yeah.
You created yourself, and the mind is strong, so therefore you make your own critics strong. And that's why it's also important to know that your mind is strong enough to ignore it as well.
True. So true.
So that's what you do.
Yeah. And it's who said that? I don't remember. Just let it go. I don't remember. That's right now my post-COVID brain, I think.
It's about quoting someone. It's a quote you're thinking about, or?
Yeah, but I don't remember the quote, and I don't remember who said it anymore. It came up and it's gone already.
Let it bear, and you will find it later then.
Yeah, true.
It'll come back to you.
Yeah. With writing,
no pressure.
No, not at all. And with writing, and especially your first draft, you don't need any, in essence, you don't need any critic, especially not an inner critic. You just need to write the story. And
exactly.
Yeah, and it's like,
and what you need to write is basically something to write on, even if it's just paper and a pencil the old-fashioned way, or a laptop or whatever. You need something to write on. And the other thing you need is to have a certain idea.
Yeah, true.
Then what you might need additionally is whatever world building or character building or research, just to get started, because starting totally from scratch might be a bit difficult. But that's why you have this composting phase, where you sort of collect and let mature that idea you had, because at some point it will be ready, and when it's ready, be ready to write it.
Yeah, it's a fun terminology that you just said, that composting. I know we talked about it earlier in
I've been using it for a while. the metaphor is quite nice, I find.
Mm-hmm.
It's about making your babies grow.
Yeah. And it's like,
Yeah.
even if you can't figure it out right now, if you just let it compost, in the back of your mind, it will keep developing. And at some point, you will wake up or you are writing and you're like, oh, that was what I was looking for. And then you can continue with that particular
sold
scene.
it! Yay!
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's...
If I need those points, I often find them when I stand in the shower for some reason. That's a really good place to discover those things. That's the connection. That's like always.
Yeah.
Almost always, anyway. Like 9 out of 10 cases, I saw those things in the shower.
Yeah, it's weird how that can work, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's funny.
Yeah. I mean, when I worked as an interior...
Sounds like I'm showering all the time, though.
Yeah! Well, you know, it's you... The best way to work through ideas is to do something completely different. Just go out for a walk, or
sometimes, yeah,
when you're in the shower, and
do your course, do your normal work.
Yeah, and it will come to you.
Whatever, it will come to you. Don't stress. It will come to you.
Yeah. I remember times when I was...
Because stress.
Yeah, stress doesn't work.
Yeah, because stress. No, it doesn't. No, not at all.
Just let it go. And I remember I was back at my old work as an interior cleaner, and interior cleaning is a really physical workout in essence. And I would be working, and at some point just a thought would pop up, and I was like, okay, I need to jot that down right now, because I'm gonna need that later when I continue my writing, because I just solved this and that problem. And that just happened when I was at work. And I would jot it down or dictate it in my phone, and I could just keep on continuing with my work. And I mean, it took maybe 10 seconds, and I just could keep on going. And I could not only keep on going with my work at that moment, but later on I could also keep on going with my writing project. And that is what is so important. Yeah.
It's about taking those 10 seconds and actually do it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
Why we write fantasy, and that is just simply because it's fascinating, right?
Yeah.
It has always hooked me on.
Yeah. The fun thing is, in the past I read more the girly books about girls who were in bands, or who were, I don't know, into horse riding and things like that. And at some point I started reading William S. Sarabanda's books about... It was very long ago. I want to say Neanderthaler, but it probably is around that time. It's a really long series of books, and I read Jamari Owl's books. Those were also very good. But that was more historical. In a way, you can also regard it as fantasy, but not quite, because I mean, we know a lot about history, but about how people were really interacting with each other, we don't know that. Not into the extent that it was written in those books. So in a way, it's fantasy, but also not really. I really came into fantasy when I started watching series like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Charmed and more TV series like that. And then I really got into the fantasy world. And the fun thing is, even though I only started reading those books that late, I mean, it was the end of my teenage years, beginning 20 years, I started writing a fantasy story back when I was an early teen, and it was a story about a group of children who were on a boat on a sail ship, and I think it was something like the end of school or something like that, and the world was really a dark place because a lot of the environment was polluted. Yeah, that was my idea back then.
A post-apocalypse.
Yeah, I didn't know it at that time, of course, but yeah, I wrote that.
I think the first stories I was thinking about, I wasn't even aware of it being fantasy.
Yeah.
But I just thought, I would like to tell a story like this. And I guess that's when I knew I wanted to write for real.
It's incredible, right?
And later during my teens, I had a friend who is a published author by now. But she and I, we used to, like, when other teens were hanging out, doing things together, we could be in her room or in my room, just hang around and write, and we would let each other read what we had been writing.
Incredible, right?
That was kind of a early start, but that was like entirely different stories. But reading fantasy, I think 11, 12, I might have been around that age. I started to read those things.
So you've been reading them longer than I have.
Maybe, yeah, but I was reading all kinds of things. I was like eating books. Literally.
Yeah.
Reading a lot.
Well, I do remember.
You said you remember.
Well, I remember a time that I actually hated reading books. It was a time when we had to make book reports for high school. And we had to go into so many what I thought were boring details, and we had to really, I don't know, break apart the story, for lack of a better word at the moment. And at some point I just wanted to
excavate.
Yeah, and at some point
it's about excavating their world building.
Yeah, well, no, it was not even the world building, it was just character and the storyline, and that was it.
Yeah.
And
it was more a story structure analysis then.
Yeah, and why did the character do this, and well, things like that. And it was boring to me at that moment. And at some point, I just only wanted to read the very simple books where I was like, okay, girl and boy start have a relationship, they start to argue, they break up, and they come together in the end. You don't need to think about that. That is how it works.
It just happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it works.
That's quite fine, yeah.
Yeah. So
I think that might have been because your brain wanted to have rest from all that analysis things.
So true, so true. And when I didn't need to make those book reports anymore, when I just only needed to read a certain amount of books for my book list to get my points, etc., then I was like, now I can just read everything. Okay, that's good. So yeah, that's what
yum. Yeah,
yum, exactly.
Everything.
That's when I started to really reading again, and really had a lot of fun with it again. Yeah.
Because forced labor is never fun, right?
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Fee asks, are there specific books or authors that made you want to be a writer, or for the first time thinking about it? Oh, that's a good question.
Kind of a good question, yes, because I'm not sure if I'm able to pinpoint one book. So it's a darn good question, actually.
I'm the same. It's not one specific book. It's just, I remember.
But I have to say, I read Narnia very early, rather early, and I reread it, like all 7 books, when I was older, because I bought this 1 volume in English. So before that, I had only read 1 book.
Okay.
And that was The Witch and the Wardrobe part.
Yeah, and I have only
because
read that book.
I read when I was quite young.
Yeah, I have only read the first book, but not the rest. No, and I think
some of those other stories are as good or better than Witch in the Wardrobe section.
Okay,
I have to say, yeah, because
that means I need to read the rest as well.
It sort of opens up. Yeah, it sort of opens up a quite different world, because that forestry winter landscape thing, that's sort of what we connect to it, but. It's so much more than that.
Okay, that's interesting. Time to read those other books as well for me.
And perhaps when I was more conscious about reading fantasy, that was when I was about 15. Then I read The Lord of the Rings Tolkien stories, the classic Tolkien stories. You can't get past them.
No,
sort of.
No.
At some point you read them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and they're good.
Yeah.
Just plain and simple, good. Like, everybody gets something different out of them, and come on, the guy made the tropes we are using, more or less. So
and the way he writes, but that's something for another time.
Oh yeah, he writes so beautifully.
Yeah.
Even people complain, "Oh, he's so old-fashioned, heavy English." It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
find it
it's,
so lovely.
yeah, and you have to
Totally love it.
yeah, yeah, you have to remember he wrote it, I think, almost a century ago, give or take.
Yeah,
He was
you have
on,
to remember that
yeah.
he was an English professor. He was a grown man during the Second World War.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
logical that his writing style is far more different than our writing style right now. It's the same for
Yes.
poems. I read an article, I think you posted that in the Discord, about an article where people were shown poems written by AI and written by Shakespeare and other
Oh yeah.
poets like that, and they found that the AI written poems were easier to digest. Well, yeah, I kind of expected that.
Really? You say so?
Well, in a way, I mean, poetry is made from the heart, and
Yes.
they came from a time that was so vastly different than our time is right now, in many ways,
Often,
anyways.
yes. Yeah.
So their poetry is also vastly different, and that's logical. And
Yeah.
they wrote it for their audience, not for us. I mean,
Yes.
that's the difference between the two kinds of works. And that is also what you see with fantasy authors. George R. R. Martin learned a lot from Tolkien. I'm very positive about that.
Yeah.
And there is a reason why they call Tolkien the grandfather of fantasy. Like you said, he invented many tropes. The way he started his story, his world, is, if I'm correct, because he invented the Elven language, or one of the Elven languages he started with, and he built the world around that. That is so different.
And that was because he was interested in, like, especially the Old Norse culture.
Yeah, and he used all that information to create an amazing world, and
Yeah. He
everything.
needed something to use that language interest for.
Yeah, and he was, if I'm correct, he was a linguistic in one way or another.
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah, so
And to this day, his Elven language is one of the most elaborate, like, made languages ever.
yeah.
And there's
Incredible.
even this Norwegian nerd who has been translating the Bible into it.
Wow.
That's quite fun. Yeah.
Wow.
Like is it Quadia it's called? Or what it was again? I might remember wrong just now. But anyway, it's one of the most elaborate conlangs ever.
Yeah, it's incredible. And that was even before.
And he spent over 20 years on it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that was even, well, I want to say that was even before conlangs existed, but it's not quite like that.
Not really. No.
No.
Conlangs have been around for a while.
Yeah, only we didn't call it conlangs back then.
No.
Before, they were just called codes. I mean, people would write letters and messages in a way that people who wouldn't know wouldn't understand it. They would just read innocent notes. But
yes, and just to put things into perspective here, just to interrupt you a bit. Like a person like Queen Mary of Scots.
Yeah.
Here we are talking Elizabeth I era. This is like Tudor era. She had more than 20 codes, as in languages.
Exactly.
And I know that because of her letters have been found.
Yeah.
So making up something for code is not new.
Indeed.
But the term conlang, I wonder if that comes from the RPG of the 70s, perhaps.
I think it's from the RPG world, indeed. The constructed languages, as they call it.
Yes.
I think it originated there. The tabletop games, the LARP games. I think it originated somewhat. The term originated there.
Or they might have taken it from contemporary fiction of the 70s, because I sort of have this vague idea. I might have read something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
yeah, that's another thing to research, actually.
Yeah, indeed. And it's fun how things can grow like that, and how grow and evolve. I mean, now nowadays we have many authors who would like to use conlangs, who will develop small pieces just to have that idea of having a conlang. And there are authors who really do a good job with it, or who let others do the job. If my information is correct, George R. R. Martin.
That's the thing. He didn't make one. He just made a few words, and there was his HBO series. When that started to spin, they hired in a professional linguistic.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
and now that's one of the most popular conlangs.
Yeah, the Dothraki language and the High Valyrian language. There were little pieces in his book, but I don't know if he made it himself in the books. I think he even.
I think he did.
Yeah, did he? Okay.
But just a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
But then a professional linguistic took those words he had and used as a base for creating the rest.
And it's fun to do. It's fun to...
And that was a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
I think.
I think so as well. I mean, creating a language that really works in your story can take a lot of time, depending on how much you want to do with it. I mean, if you just want to have, I don't know, one scroll of information, or just one note or a few notes, then you don't need to invent a complete language. You just invent...
No, I need to go there at some point.
Yeah.
Before I get tangled up in too many errors, really.
I foresee that for myself as well. I mean, I already...
Just to consider it, just to have mentioned a fun fact, is that, for example, on a language app like Duolingo, which many uses, you got the Valyrian and Klingon. Those are conlangs that are actually possible to learn.
Oh, wow.
So, about going there, it's possible, yeah. But I think that one thing done right was actually getting a professional linguistic for the George R. R. Martin stories. That that was a good thing, I think. True. And that has spun off an entirely new business.
Yeah, and it's incredible how that can work, and how people can get really enthusiastic about it, and people will speak on conventions and such. People will speak to each other in that language.
Just and there the author sits not knowing it.
Yeah. The author is like something like, what are you talking about?
Excuse me? Can you say that in English, please?
Yeah. Can you speak the common tongue, please? Because I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh.
But man, you invented it.
Oh my god, yeah.
That's hilarious.
It is. It most certainly is. And when I think of Tergaenae, I mean, let me rephrase that. In fantasy stories, especially nowadays, people write as if many people write as if everybody in the whole wide world of their novel world speaks exactly the same language. And then I'm like, I live in the Netherlands, and okay, we have Dutch, we have Fries, we have Limburgs, and then we have all kinds of dialects, a great variety of dialects. And the Fries and Limburgs, those are official languages here in the Netherlands. Just go to New Zealand, where you have English, but you also have the Maori language. I don't know what the language is called, so apologies for
Maori?
that. I have no idea.
Wouldn't they just call their language Maori?
No, I think it has a different name, but I'm not sure about it. Don't hold me to it.
I guess that we would agree what Maori was, and that would be like the old Aboriginal name for the language they speak there.
It could be, but I thought the Maori were.
They might call it something different, but.
I don't know. It's something interesting to find out.
Yeah.
And you have the same in, for example, Hawaii, where the natives also have a completely different language.
Yes.
I mean, those are all countries.
Which is also possible to learn on Duolingo, if you want.
And those are all
Yeah.
countries that are not
It's available.
huge. Yeah, and if you look at it, those are all countries that are not huge. I mean, in Belgium, they speak both Dutch and they speak French. And Belgium is smaller than the Netherlands is. We speak multiple languages, just the inhabitants. I'm not talking about us learning English because it's one of the big world languages, but it's because we speak, I speak Dutch, I barely speak any Limburgs. I can speak with an accent, but that's about it. But I can, most of the time, I can somewhat understand it. Fries is a whole different language, a whole different ballgame. And that's just in one country. And that is why I always...
And a fairly small country, yeah.
Yeah, in a fairly small country indeed. And that is what always surprises me in fantasy worlds, that everybody speaks the same language. I mean, it's not that it is said, okay, they speak the common tongue, of which I say, okay, I have that too. But amongst themselves, they speak their own language. And I'm like, why don't they do that? I mean, one of the fun parts is that you can have these discrepancies and these things where people don't understand because they have a different language.
Yeah, it's more plausible.
Yeah, and that is something that still surprises me. And it's also one of the things that I decided for Tergaenae, that one way or another they will have different languages. There is the common tongue, which is spoken by a lot of people, but
the common tongue is not spoken by everybody either.
Exactly.
That's how I've done. But I have sold things on, like, my world is much water, it's much oceans. And it's quite common for sailors to learn other languages. So if you are in merchant biz in any way or are traveling for different reasons, it's normal to know more languages than your own. But in Corsa, which is comprised of 11 countries, they have a common tongue. And that's different from the old tongue, which is like the more temple liturgy sort of thingy. And that's what's spoken a few hundred years back. And then when I have text where foreigners meet, I have simply stated that they spoke together in this language, and then I write what they speak in English, because otherwise the reader wouldn't understand it.
Yeah.
Of course, it's enough to simply say that
exactly.
This character could understand some of that language, and he thought they were saying blah blah blah.
Yeah,
that's enough.
Indeed, that's also how I do it.
You don't have to have the words.
No,
you don't need them.
No, that's not necessary. But at least you have to mention it, that not everybody speaks the same language.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, in Tergaenae, the Silk and Bamboo Kingdom and Dragon City and the White City, those are places, and Devil's Port also, by the way, those are places where a large variety of people will come. Silk and Bamboo is a huge seafaring nation, and they are part of a huge trading network. So it's far more logical that they will speak multiple languages and they have their common tongue. Dragon City is a main hub, is the original base for dragon companions. It's where it all started in the past, at least that is the lore. And surprisingly enough, that is the lore for dragon companions in other countries as well. So that is really deeply rooted. And it means that they too have a great variety of languages. Also because they have helped peoples flee from certain situations. So those peoples bring their own customs and their own languages, their own clothing or building styles, etc. into Dragon City. And the White City is a very big, important mage city where people who have magic will also go to be further trained or to get education in the beginning to begin with. So they too have multiple languages because that is also a city where a lot of people come. But in the kingdom of Tualma, for example, where Najat comes from in the south of the equator, south of the Ring of the Many Islands, they speak the language there, but they hardly speak any other languages. Some speak the common tongue, some don't. So there you already see the difference. And Najat really needed to learn a lot when he came to Dragon City with his mother, and that's so important.
And that's also natural,
because
and it's an important piece of world building. You're
exactly. exactly. And it's, I mean, here in the Netherlands, we have refugees, asylum seekers from, I don't know, from Syria, from Nigeria, from, well, all over the world, basically. And they come to us to also learn Dutch because they don't know Dutch, but they want to be part of our society. They want to be able to participate in
natural.
our society. Yeah. And for that, you need to learn that language. If you don't have to speak it perfectly, but you need to understand the basics.
But understanding messages, that's important.
Just
like if we, for some reason, would need to emigrate, let's say Japan, that's a country that is very different from ours. They got a different writing set. They don't write in Latin characters. We would need to learn some basics of language, both written and spoken. And of course, there is the chance of the occasional earthquake, and then we would need to understand what the warning messages would be. And that's just one simple reason, even for going there for holidays. Like if I was going to Japan, I would want to stay at least a month because there is so much to see.
Yeah.
And then it would be natural to start straight away with learning just a few basics. Just a few things like precautions.
Yeah.
Because you would need to understand, like a speaker system yelling a warning. I could know the word tsunami, but it could be good to like make out one sensible sentence, or like break a 250 word barrier could be useful, I think. And that would mean I would want to do that just for holidays. So if people are moving continents to a different country, it's natural to learn languages, and of course you bring that into writing.
Exactly. And it's not, I mean, it's not just for emergency situations, it's also just for the use of, I don't know, public transport, for example. I saw it in a Chinese series.
Find food.
And find food, yes. I saw it in a Chinese series. Food. In a Chinese series, they went to Norway, I think, and one of the main characters had already been living there for several years, so he knew where to go, etc. But another came in, was fresh, hardly knew any English, and let alone Norwegian, and she needed to use the public transport, and she got lost at some point, or somehow a little bit lost, because she didn't understand what was spoken. So she got off, I think, 1 or 2 steps too late, because she didn't know that she had to get off at an earlier point. And that's a simple thing like using public transport. Now, translate that to fantasy series, and I mean, we don't, in fantasy series, you don't often have public transport. You have carriages that can take you from one city to another, but public transport like we know it depends. So you really need to ask your directions, and if someone starts to talk to you, I don't know, for you gibberish, then you're like, okay, I don't understand it, so where the hell do I go? And that's also possible in a fantasy world. So think about that.
Absolutely. And then there's the possibility of misunderstandings. We don't even go there right now, do we? Or we'll sit here another hour. And because I really misunderstandings, that's a huge impact on stories, and it's also a huge point of making conflict.
For all our other podcast listeners, if you want to be there live the next time we do this again, please join our Discord. The link is in the description box below, and remember to click the emoji check mark to be able to access the rest of the Discord. And feel free to leave ideas to talk about in the comments below or in the Discord.
Request things we can talk about.
Exactly. And then next time we will talk a bit more about language differences and conflicts. And then we can also
misunderstandings and all the things that can lead to conflict. Leave examples if you want. Like, have you read some really great conflict points or things that might trigger a conflict? I'd love to hear it.
Same here. And
what triggers your interest?
And if you have topics because you ran into hurdles, just let us know, and we may be able to help you in a different podcast or in the upcoming podcast. Check my channel to see when the next podcast podcast will be, because I will announce it there, or check out Discord, where we will also announce the next podcast. We haven't made a schedule for that yet, so we have to announce the second episode. And if you are listening to this way later on, then just click on for the next episode, and we wish you a lot of fun. It was great having you here. Bye bye.